Hello. Can everyone hear me at the back? Yes. Fantastic. Okay, so good afternoon everyone and welcome to the keynote session of the Open Cultural Heritage stream at OKFestival. My name is Sam Leon and I'm a community coordinator at the Open Knowledge Foundation and I'll be hosting the next 90 minutes. Alongside my colleague Juris Pekul, who over there, I lead our Open Glam initiative, which has been responsible for much of the programming of the activities during this stream. What is Open Glam? Well, I know the term may elicit at least glam images of big hair, glitter, but just to be clear, in this context, this is an acronym for galleries, libraries, and archives and museums. And Open Glam is all about assisting cultural heritage institutions in making their digitized content and the data that they hold about their objects more openly available online. We do this through running legal licensing workshops, such as the one run earlier this morning, and publishing documentation and guides on how to address the technical challenges to opening up cultural content and data. So this is all essentially about making objects such as digitized paintings, text and photographs, the content and the data about those objects more easily accessible and reusable. It's also about promoting the value of the public domain more generally and digitized cultural collections. We want to promote those digitized cultural collections that are made available under an open license. For those of you not familiar with it already, I suggest you check out our online journal, also hosted by the Open Knowledge Foundation, called the Public Domain Review, which curates some of the most beautiful collections of openly licensed digital artifacts, pulled in from cultural heritage institutions from all over the world, as well as inviting contributions from scholars and artists on public domain works. So why do we do all of this? Why does the Open Knowledge Foundation work in the sphere of open cultural content and data? It's not hard transparency data, it's not financial data, it's not the kind of data that is normally associated with the open movement. But it's still very, very important. We believe that open license and data and content will have huge benefits and do already have huge benefits for those working in teaching and research. Not only does having more books, photographs and artworks freely available improve and enrich the learning experience at every turn, as demonstrated by the ubiquitous use of open resources such as Wikipedia or other Wikimedia projects such as Wikisource in the classroom, it also encourages others to build applications and tools for interacting with content and data in ways previously unthought of. One of the key areas, for example, which is currently going on, and one area in which we're currently working, is improving discovery mechanisms for cultural works. As my colleague Jonathan Gray from the Open Knowledge Foundation remarked in a recent piece on the Guardian data blog, what if the imagination that currently goes into creating social discovery services for music or films, like Spotify, Last.fm or Netflix, were applied to similar services for public domain paintings or literary works? We believe that opening more cultural data and content is one way of encouraging such innovation. And it's the mission of Open Glam to develop the communities, tools and technical infrastructure that will create the vibrant cultural commons that is open to each and every one of us. In this effort, we are joined by our friends from Open Cultuur Data in the Netherlands, the Open Rights Group, the Glam Wiki project as part of Wikimedia, and Creative Commons, all of whom have contributed substantially to the creation of this track. While we face challenges in getting more cultural content online, we are again and again inspired by the efforts of those within our memory institutions who embrace the drive towards openness in this field. It is generally recognised that enabling access to cultural resources is one of the key functions of cultural heritage institutions, and we seek to demonstrate that openness is one of the best ways for cultural heritage institutions to fulfil this core part of their mission in the digital age. Coming to Finland, brought yet more proof of the will within the cultural heritage sector to embrace openness. Institutions such as the Central Art Archive and the Finnish National Library were prepared to open up content and data in anticipation of our activities for the whole week. And organisations such as the Society of Swedish Literature in Finland were kind enough to host some of the workshops that we've been running. So on to our programme. So our two keynote speakers this afternoon are prominent voices in the open cultural heritage domain and have pioneered some of the most exciting initiatives on this front. Our first speaker, Michael Edson, hails from the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, where he is Director of Web and New Media Strategy. Michael has been a powerful voice and advocate for the value of open cultural data worldwide and the potential it has for revolutionising the way we experience our shared cultural heritage. He's also written extensively about the notion of the commons as applied to the digital heritage domain and has led work on the Smithsonian concept of the commons. We're very pleased to have you here, Michael, and to give perhaps one of the most enigmatic title presentations of the whole of OKFestival, Lego Beowulf and the Web of Hands and Hearts. So, Michael, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Just a moment of preamble. I am Michael Edson with the Smithsonian Institute, though I'm not here in an official capacity today. I'm here as a regular American citizen person of planet Earth, because I think this is really one of the most important sets of ideas for our shared culture in play today. I tweet at MP Edson, and the nucleus of this slideshow you're about to see with references and hyperlinks and citations and everything is online at slideshare.net/EdsonM. And I tend to iterate and churn these shows pretty frequently. So in the next few days, you'll have this exact version up on SlideShare. And I have to say that I'm in the company of a lot of very smart, wise, experienced people, and I don't presume that I'm going to tell you anything today that you haven't already thought of yourselves. But maybe I'll be able to package some of these ideas in a way that helps you think about them newly, or helps you spread them, or helps you build upon them. And I think also, in many ways, I'm speaking to you, but maybe in a larger sense, I'm speaking with you to everyone else about how we think this stuff works in culture. So. And we start with an AV goof. Let's get the sound going to the right card. It's all about improv. And again. We can edit that out in the final version, right? That's always how I've imagined Beowulf, I have to tell you. And a warning, if you're squeamish, there's a lot of Lego character violence in this slideshow, so just close your eyes. I'll try and give you a warning. So where are you all from? Denmark. I'm from Earth. Right up there. Are you all from Earth? Cool. How many of you live on a mountaintop, like above a couple miles high? Anybody? Do any of you live at the bottom of the sea? One guy says, there's always somebody. How many of you listen to music? Pretty much everybody? Anybody not ever listen to music? Never? Do any of you not eat or drink? No, pretty much. Has anyone gone for more than a week without drinking anything? No. You look pretty diverse to me, but we all seem to live on this big wet rock hurtling through the vacuum of space at, what, 13,000 kilometers a second? And we live within a pretty narrow band of the troposphere together, somehow, for a really long time. And it's kind of a puzzling place. We have this legacy, this thing we call culture that goes back pretty far. And we seem to care about it. We behave as if we care about it a lot. It gives us stuff like that, and like that, and like that. And these physical things speak to us. They're important to us somehow, all together in the same little layer on this big wet rock hurtling through space. We make culture. Sometimes it looks like this. This is dance. Sometimes dance looks like this. Sometimes art looks like that. Sometimes art uses a different set of rules. Sometimes there really are no rules, or it's all about breaking the rules. Nature's like that too. A platypus, a mammal that lays eggs. Nature's kind of strange that way. Nature doesn't really seem to follow rules. It's kind of an unruly planet. This is Vesuvius erupting. I'm glad I wasn't there. I learned the other day that the entire middle of the United States, where the beautiful Yellowstone Park is pretty much an active volcano that's getting ready to eject, I think, 16 cubic kilometers of material into the atmosphere. It's going to kill everything within 600 miles. What is that, 1,200 kilometers or so, smothered in 3 feet of ash? That's going to happen. It's kind of a messy planet we live on together. 4.5 billion years old, wet rock hurtling through space, surrounded by an immense cold vacuum, prone to all kinds of insanity, with a lot of obnoxious, tremendously obnoxious inhabitants. Viruses that live their whole lives, have lived for eons trying to kill each other, and stuff like this everywhere.
One red suit coming right up. Look! Jesus Christ! I warned you.
That's the kind of planet we live on. It's a dangerous place. You are all descended from generation after generation after generation of total badasses. And this is what it's like. I'd made the mistake of Googling climate change graphs and was up all night sort of rocking in my bed going, oh my God. Usually when you see a graph that goes like that, it's either really good or really bad, and it's page after page of those hockey stick graphs. Biodiversity, at least 16,000 species are currently threatened with extinction, 37% of all fish. Armed conflicts, conflictmap.org lists 63 current armed conflicts on Earth. I'm going to depress the hell out of you, aren't I? I will turn the corner on you. Refugee crisis, almost 100 million people hungry, always hungry. When was the last time? No, I'm not even going to ask that question. 1.4 billion people living on less than $1.25 a day. 22,000 children die each day from poverty, loneliness, individual suffering, cultural impoverishment. I met a poet recently who operates the only community center, bookstore, cafe in a community of 500,000 people in California. Real cultural impoverishment. And I'm not even going to talk about technology-driven change, DIY bio, transhumanism, robotics, all of this stuff that's queued up, ready to crash down on our poor little Homo sapien brains faster than we're prepared to build structures to deal with the change. I'm not going to go there. And all of this comes with no instruction manual. We're just sort of sitting here on the big wet rock hurtling through the vacuum of space. For the geeks here, and I know there are a lot of you, it's Earth is open source, public domain, but there's no manual page. I don't even know if anyone's writing it yet. Maybe that's what we're doing together. And we're doing all of this with a set of wetware instructions, hardware, that is only very recently removed from the campfire. Most of our evolution on this planet was done in circumstances far, 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 far different than what we experience today, than the pressures we're experiencing today, and than that we expect to experience in the very, very near future. Tell me what aspect of human evolution has prepared us to deal with extended human lifespan, the social upheaval and change, the cultural change that will happen when we're living 200 years. Yeah. Fun talk for a Thursday afternoon. All of this is to say what you all, I think, know, if you sat down and spent the time thinking about it. We really need, it's like a comedian, we need some new material here. We've been working with the same material for a couple 100 million years, and we're kind of stuck. We need new knowledge. This is an open knowledge conference. Clearly, we need new knowledge. We need to get involved. Not just interested, but involved, and it needs to happen at big scale, and it needs to happen not soon, but now. It needs to happen yesterday. And throughout this, there's this thing called museums. Okay, that's great. Well, how do these, we have this pressing climate change, social change, evolutionary driven, it's very terrible, and yet we also have this thing called museums. Well, how do those things relate? I'm with the Open Glam workshop. A lot of us spend our lives working in these institutions, these amazing institutions. We feel this passion. But how does it relate to this stuff that really, really matters, is going to matter to our fellow humans 100 years from now? In the USA, we have about 18,000 museums. That's a lot of museums. Together, they spend about $20.7 billion a year. That's a lot of scratch. That's a lot of dough. That's more than the GDP of half the nations on Earth. If you walk up the list of GDP for nations, you get halfway up before you get anyone who's got a GDP bigger than what museums spend in the US every year. So clearly, our little Homo sapien brains think this is a good bet for something. That this investment is doing something audacious and important that we can't achieve any other way. Else we would spend the money doing something else, right? Like fixing poverty or immunizing children or something like that. And I assert that museums are very pertinent, very germane to these big challenges. We have vast collections of rare and notable physical and intellectual property. We have people with expertise and know-how. We have curiosity. We nurture curiosity, knowledge creation through research, publication, exhibition, and public programming. We hold positions of trust and respect in our communities, and we're heralded as places that, and I quote, reflect creativity, history, culture, ideas, innovation, exploration, discovery, diversity, freedom of expression, and the ideals of democracy. That's from Roy Slade's essay, Why Museums Matter. Wow, okay, that's important. And I'm always struck when I come here to Europe, where this is taken very seriously. Access to and participation in this thing we call culture is a fundamental human right. It's not an extra add-on that you get when you're done paying taxes and filling up your car with gas. This is why you do those things, so you have access to and a participation in the shared culture. It's what makes us human. It's what makes us satisfied, live satisfied and fulfilled lives. Everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. That's Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that's good stuff. So how does this endeavor that we humans on the lonely, wet planet hurtling through space, how does this endeavor called museums really work? How do we turn this $20 billion investment in the US, maybe it's $100 billion worldwide, maybe it's $200 billion worldwide, into something that matters, into something that impacts those big, hairy challenges? And here's the formula we came up with. We as a society, a joint human society, we put resources into a big box that's called heritage organizations or museums or culture. We put the resources in there: reputation, trust, time, great real estate, focus, pride. We put all that stuff in one end of a pipe, and we expect something really important to come out the other end, some kind of outcomes. It's not just an article of faith that something important happens. Resources in, out comes out the other end. And what happens in that box? What happens in that box? In the 20th century, somehow we decided to use the broadcast idiom. Those were the tools that were available to us in the 20th century, and we took them and we built a structure out of them called broadcast. And here's the way it worked. We, the smart people who work in cultural organizations, take your money, and we generate knowledge, we generate wisdom, we collect and protect, and we make the decisions. And then we dispense those things down a one-way pipe to you, the consumers, on the other end, who generally consume passively, gratefully, happily. You come to our museums, we tell you what's important and what you can and can't see, and you go away happy. And it's very good. That's very nice. It's a one-way thing, broadcast. And that broadcast idiom was great in the 20th century, before the internet. It gave us the automobile, it gave us the Hoover Dam in the great American West, it gave us Baywatch, great American television show. But that doesn't feel like a complete model for getting important work done now, the broadcast method. It breaks, I think, because of the new physics that comes to us through this thing we call the internet. Since we started going http:// and the various and sundry other protocols, there's a new sheriff in town. There's a new set of physics at play that we could use to connect resources to outcomes, maybe better than the broadcast model. And these are the three most important ones, I think, the three most important new laws of organizational physics or of human physics. First one, Joy's law. Bill Joy was the co-founder of Sun Microsystems, and he famously said, no matter what business you're in, most of the smart people work for someone else. That's a pretty bold statement. Try, Harry, do you say that in a staff meeting? It doesn't go over very well, does it? It's not a very popular thing to say, but think about it. The organization I work for is the world's largest museum and research complex with a $1.2 billion a year budget. We have a lot of stuff to take care of. There's 6,000 employees. How many people are on Earth? 7 billion, almost 7 billion now. Where is most of the innovation going to happen in the world? Within our walls of 6,000 workers, or everywhere else on the planet? Where is that going to happen? Chris Anderson, the editor of Wired magazine and serial author, stood before a Smithsonian audience and he said, pick anything in your 139 million object collection. I bet the person who knows the most about that thing, not only don't they work for you, you don't even know who they are. You can't even find them. That's Joy's law. Number two, cognitive surplus by Clay Shirky. Clay figured out that among the educated, internet-connected citizens of planet Earth, there are 1 trillion hours of free time available every year that can be used for some higher purpose. 1 trillion hours. Clay notes that Americans spend about 230 billion of those hours every year doing what? Watching television, watching Baywatch. Cognitive surplus talks about the design patterns that you can use now that you have http://, the design patterns that you can use to harness that surplus of cognitive ability worldwide. The last of these three patterns that I think change the rules is from Kathy Sierra, who's a thought leader in social media. And Kathy tweeted a few years ago, November 2009, she said, I'm your user. I'm supposed to be the protagonist. I'm on a hero's journey. Your company, your cultural organization, your government should be the mentor, helpful sidekick, not an orc. Kathy says, in the old paradigm, in the broadcast paradigm, the formula was follow me, buy my product, love me because I'm great. I'm great. I have the museum with the biggest columns and the best dinosaur. Now the formula is follow me, friend me, like me, invest attention, resources, trust, and reputation in me because I help make you great. Everyone who doesn't work for me. That's a very different relationship and perhaps a better model of knowledge creation. So, broadcast is great. You know, we're not going to crowdsource engineering the space shuttle. Well, maybe we will, parts of it. But there are some tasks that don't yield easily to this global networked knowledge sharing thing. But this is no longer clearly a complete model. You all know that in your fiber. I'm trying to lay a rhythm track around it that lets us dance a bit. So, I'm supposedly a digital strategist. I'm the director of web and new media strategy. It's kind of a weird thing to be. And I go to a lot of workshops just like this. We were in one yesterday, sitting around a room, whiteboards. I wasn't at this workshop. I got this picture off of Flickr. They follow the same kabuki performance form. Usually someone tall in a good suit from outside your organization stands at the front and says things, and everyone lines up and nods up and down for a long time. And these days, there's a clarion call, digital strategy. And there's usually some kind of fetish object that you're trying, like we gotta be more social media. We gotta be on Twitter, we gotta be on Facebook, we've gotta be crowdsourcing, we've gotta be tweeting. And everyone around the room goes, yeah, we gotta do, absolutely, we gotta do that. I read about it in the paper, my kids do that. But really, all of us professionals trained during the broadcast idiom are downsampling those ideas into the way we were trained, the way of working, the model of organizing that we're trained with, that we're familiar with. So we're talking this great game of progress and open knowledge creation, but really our reflexes, our habits are built around an older way of doing things. Blah, 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 broadcast. We've got a year to decide. I mean, how many times have you gone out of the meeting high-fiving each other, and the next thing you do is have the committee meeting, and the committee meets once a month, for a year until you're sick of each other and you generate the report and you can't bear to share it with anyone because they're going to criticize it, and then you have to meet for another year, and it goes on and on. I can see some of the eye rolling. You guys have been there. That's what happens, and often there's someone in the back of the room, a caterer, an intern, who's seeing this. Everyone's downsampling new ideas into a familiar context, usually the broadcast idiom of the 20th century. And I'll give you an example from a strategy workshop I was at. The strategic goal of this museum, and don't try and guess what the museum is, because you'll get it wrong. I've obscured it very carefully. The goal of the museum, become the preeminent place for engagement and dialogue about national identity and the accomplishment and experience of citizens. Well, that relates to some of these big, hairy goals and challenges. That's an awesome strategic goal. The proposed project, digital project to fuel that, to fulfill that strategy was build an online collection of 10 million portraits of citizens and their stories, created and uploaded without official curation by members of the public. Sounds very open to me. Build a community around this initiative to fuel engagement with national history, biography, and artistic creativity. Wow, I'd like to do that. That feels like a bit like the future to me. After 90 minutes of workshopping and expensive Post-it notes and those awesome big Post-it notes that cost like 30 euros a pad. It's very privileged to be able to work with those. We came up with this project. We sort of settled down on this project. Ouch. Yeah. Build a website, do a website about family portraits. That's what's happening. That's what's missing. That's the translation error. And I'm trying to tell you that it's not good enough anymore. It's just not good enough. We put resources in, we expect outcomes out, and I think the outcomes aren't good enough. They don't come strong enough, at big enough scale, and they don't have the impact that we frankly need now, given where we are. Let me give you an example, a real example of the collision between broadcast and this other model. And I pick on some of my beloved colleagues here at the Smithsonian because I love them. I've been giving a version of this presentation, these slides for years. I tease them because I love them so dearly. This is the official canonical collection information page on the Smithsonian's websites for Spaceship One. It's a testimony to innovation and verve and and imagination. It's the first privately financed rocket ship to take a human being into outer space twice. Winner of the X Prize. The Smithsonian owns the physical object. It hangs at the Air and Space Museum a block from my office. I can walk over and go see it. If I'm tenacious, I can find this page on the Smithsonian's websites. And it's a lot like every collection information page in the world. You have a little picture, and you have some curatorial text. You know, bada bing, bada boom. There it is. You go to Wikipedia, what do you get? Hyperlinks. You get hyperlinks. There are no hyperlinks on the Smithsonian's collection information page. Curators are busy. They've got stuff to do. They can't be curating hyperlinks. Hundreds of hyperlinks, scores of hyperlinks, hyperlinks to the biographies of the individuals involved, the material science, the history of the X Prize. It goes on and on and on. Imagine trying to tell a story to a 16-year-old without hyperlinks now. It seems ludicrous. It's translated into 26 languages. You know, what institution is able to do that with their Joy's Law workforce inside their institutional walls? There are 400 editors. You know, imagine your boss coming into your Web 1.0 organization and saying, hey, everyone, we're doing a new project that's going to have 400 of you editing it simultaneously. There's no way. There's no way the broadcast idiom will yield to this kind of force. Go to Flickr. Search exactly the name of the spaceship in Flickr. There are 9 billion photos in Flickr. There are 2,592 photos tagged by users without any control or collaboration with exactly the name of the spaceship. No museum director woke up one day and said, we've got to get funding to get 2,592 photos of Spaceship One up on the web. It just happened. You know, it happened because of this physics, this new physics that we talked about. And the images, the resources are wonderful. They really begin to give you a 360-degree view of this object that one smartest person in the world working alone in their office could never do, even if with an army of interns. And what does Spaceship One do? It's a spaceship. It flies. And I edited out, because I'm among open content and copyright-savvy people, I'll share with you. I've given a few versions of this talk. This video on YouTube is set to Magic Carpet Ride by Steppenwolf. You know, bump, 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 bump. Now YouTube senses that track is behind it and yields to the copyright negotiation that YouTube has done with the publisher of that song. And the video won't play on many devices. It won't play on Android or iOS because it knows that Magic Carpet Ride is in there. Anyways, little digression about the hidden dangers of rights management. So this Spaceship One flies. It flies. So look, which one of these resources would you go to understand Spaceship One? The one that in the 20th century broadcast idiom we assumed was the canonical oracle of all truth, or everywhere else in the world? Where would you go? Where do you go to build your understanding of the world, of this cold, wet rock hurtling through the vacuum of space? Another example, I was in Denmark recently a few times, and I got interested in the Solvognen. I tried to pronounce that correctly. The Trondheim Sun Chariot, one of the most revered objects in Danish cultural heritage. And of course, when you want to know about that, you Google it, and the first thing you find is the Wikipedia article with some really crappy pictures, by the way. Who knew that the Trondheim Sun Chariot has a Facebook page? I think that's kind of cool. I think that's very cool. You can, with some tenacious effort and help from insiders, find the canonical collection information page for that object on the National Museum's website in Denmark. There it is. It's got a nice little video interview with the curator. It's been viewed almost 3,000 times. It's very nice. Not a lot of information there. But if you really want to start learning about this object, everybody's a researcher as soon as they find something they're interested in. I very quickly found this place, the Skadi Forum, a Germanic online community. They have some small conversations about the Sun Chariot, but overall, this community has 40,000 active members discussing 300 threads with 700,000 posts. You know, can you get that in an institution? Can you get that from an institutional staff? No, you can't do it. And it goes on and on. I mean, I love the homepages of my Scandinavian brothers and sisters museums. They're very fine. They're very appealing and seductive and fun and current. But I also like these homepages. This is the National Museum of Denmark's homepage on Pinterest. And I wanted to see if I could find a sun chariot on Pinterest. Very quickly, I could do a search, and yeah, I found lots of people interested, real people interested in the sun chariot. Not academicians speaking out to an empty room, but real people engaged, I think it's fair to say, with the sun chariot. I think I found 6 different instances of it, maybe 9. 9 National Museum sun chariots, just through a search, very quick, half a second. I found this woman. This was the first result I found, the first person who had pinned or collected an instance of the Trundholm sun chariot, Sunniva Henriksdottir. And I went to her profile. She's very interested in the Bronze Age. She's made a Bronze Age collection that includes objects she's pulled from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, British archaeology websites, and other Met, Metropolitan Museum of Art, National Museum of Denmark, more National Museum of Denmark, and there it is at the bottom, the Trundholm sun chariot. She's collecting. That link actually doesn't go back to the National Museum site. It goes back to the course syllabus for an obscure American college in Virginia, not far from where I live back in the States. Who knew? Who knew that was there and that Sunniva Henriksdottir was using that as the canonical reference, trusted reference for her interest in ancient Norse objects. And here's Sunniva's sort of profile page, her collections, the things she's gathering. She's got a collection on Anglo-Saxons, rings, willows, spinning, straw hats. This is clearly a crafter with a lot of personality and a very strong visual appeal. I get a sense of who this person is, what her interests are, weaving. It goes on and on and on. This is curiosity. She's collected over 1,000 things through this process. There they are. That took me a long time to put together, but that's pretty epic. That's pretty epic. I think in the broadcast, the glorious heyday of the broadcast medium, we didn't think people would do things like this. Consuming cultural messages was a passive activity, not an active one. She follows 41 people. Sunniva follows 41 people, and they in turn come from all over the world. London, Portland, Oregon, Kansas in the US, Cape Town, South Africa, Antwerp, the UK, a little village of 20 houses in the north of Germany. That's literally the location of one of the people she follows. And this woman has almost 2,000 followers. The physics of this is not a broadcast physics. And each of those people follows people. And if you step through this second level social network of this random woman that I found who is interested in Danish archaeology, the 41 people she follows have 16,090 total followers. They follow 12,000 people. Her immediate social network has 28,485 people in it. When I talk about scale, when I talk about winning and engaging and learning and creating at scale, this begins to feel like the right thing to be doing. And this is just a random woman I found. And this is not just passive consumption and collecting and going on. This is active. There's evidence of great curiosity and activity here. A Viking culture search on the photo website Flickr shows people doing, making, building, visiting museums, curious about the world. People love their cultural organizations. They love their culture. They made their culture somehow with no instruction manual, no man page. They've created all this. Tribute videos come from unknown, unasked for sources. I stumbled through this search on a historical Lego reenactment group on Flickr. Historical Lego? So, okay, that's cute. You can dismiss that maybe in your staff meeting. But if you look a little deeper, this group has 778 members who've shared over 7,000 photos with each other. Okay, this looks like something's going on here. Let's look a little deeper. I did a search of Viking in this reenactment group and found people doing historically accurate reenactments of famous scenes from Viking history. Why? Why not? What else do you do with Legos? And you start looking around. This guy writes fan fiction about Viking life. Detailed. And his posts have hundreds of comments. How many times have you guys published something on your blogs or website that you thought was important and nobody says a word about it? Been there, done that. And yet here's this fecundity, this enthusiasm for life. This guy's called the Shadow Viking. Okay, so I'm sure he's some Viking scholar somewhere. He's from Michigan. in the USA. He's from Holland, Michigan. Go figure. You know, would your marketing department, to finish your big climactic multi-year project on Viking history in your museums, know that there was a fan club in Holland, Michigan for this? No, but there he is. There he is. And he's doing stuff. And this woman makes pretty awesome Viking ships out of Legos. People manufacture their own historically accurate headgear, their own detailed. The regular manufactured Lego version of the helmet wasn't accurate enough. So people 3D print them, they design them, they share them. Someone started a business manufacturing these. There's a little essay on this website about why this little tiny Viking helmet is more accurate than the others. This woman who does the Viking ship reenactments, she describes herself as a middle-aged, eccentric woman living in High Wycombe, Buckinghamshire, England. And she's communicating and collaborating with this kid from Holland, Michigan. You know, could you manufacture that with an unlimited marketing budget? No, you couldn't do it. And yet there it is. There's humanity doing it right before your eyes. I showed you the Lego Beowulf reenactment at the beginning of the show. 200,000 views. How many did the official curatorial video on the National Museum's website have? I think it was just a couple thousand. Does that mean this is 100 times better? No, not necessarily, but it's evidence that something powerful is going on here at a magnitude beyond the wildest dreams of our well-funded cultural organizations. This is a lead. This is an important lead, and we'd better listen. I also found in this site a reenactment of the Battle of Malden. I don't know the Battle of Malden at all.
Then he commanded shields to be borne, the warriors to go, so that they all stood on the river bank. One troop could not come at the other there by reason of the water. There the flood came flowing after the ebb tide. The streams ran together. They were impatient to clash their spears. There they stood in array beside the stream of Panta, the battle line of the East Saxons and the ship army. Nor could one of them injure the other, unless anyone received death from the arrow's flight. The tide went out. The pirates stood ready, many Vikings eager for battle.
I mean, is that awesome or what? It's, you know, sorry about the Lego beheading. That was a little gruesome, but is that I just fell in love with this when I saw this person using the Lego panels as the tide coming in. And the tide is, and if you couldn't read those subtitles, you're not alone. They're written in the original Old English, okay? It's like a language that's been extinct for 1,100 years. This is intense stuff. This begins to feel like the toolkit that I would want to nurture if we're going to survive another few millennia on this highly challenged, cold, wet rock hurtling through space. And it doesn't go unappreciated by any stretch of the imagination. If you want to know more, the Battle of Malden, I'd never heard of the Battle of Malden. I searched the National Museum site because they know, right? They're the experts. I mean, yeah, right. You know, that doesn't surprise you, no results found. You know, you can't know everything. Nobody can know, no institution can know everything, but you know, maybe everyone else in the world can know enough. And of course, there's a good Wikipedia page on the Battle of Malden because somebody's passionate about it, somebody remembers. I had never noticed before that little link up there. Is anyone in this room, someone in this room might be responsible for this link. It says coordinates. And it links to a site I'd never heard of called GeoHack, which is a kind of a clearinghouse for geo-referenced maps related to Wikipedia articles. Pretty damn cool. I clicked on the OpenStreetMap view, and now I know where on Earth, literally where on Earth this happened. It's starting to feel very real to me, like part of my past. I go into Malden, and this is truly a shared effort. As you know, OpenStreetMap's hundreds, thousands of edits. I clicked through, I think, 100 pages next to see if I could find the end of the edits on this map, and I couldn't. Some of the edits are pretty funny. Harmonized tagging of ways of St. James, fix some little minor stuff. Could you pay your staff to do this? No way. You couldn't at gunpoint get your staff to do 100,000 edits on this map region. And yet, here's the work. I love this one, updated ownership of bakery. Now, that was very important to someone, and if I was hungry for a croissant in Malden, that would really be awesome. I would need that. Going over to the Google Street Maps view, I can look around. I can begin to look around. Now this is a very real place to me. I can understand the feeling, the topology, the geography, the essence of the battle. This starts to make sense to me. This is getting visceral and personal. And through Panorama, I can really look around. This picture of a monument to the Battle of Malden on the site of the battle, that moves me. We tend to think in our brilliant heritage organizations with our experts and staff that we're the ones who make great content. You guys can't make great content. You're not professionals, but there's amazing beauty out there, outside our institutional walls. Stunning. So, here we are back at the wet rock with no instruction manual. Really, none.
Christ! I warned you.
I've done it again.
I warned you, but did you listen to me? Oh, no, you know, didn't you? Oh, it's just a harmless little bunny, isn't it? Well, it's always the same. I always tell them, do they listen to me?
Right.
Oh, no.
It doesn't end well. That does not end well. Over and over and over again, in my adult study of history and natural history and science, this is the pattern you see. Someone in the village, the big village now of all of us connected, knows the story. The John Cleese character, he knows the story. And do we listen? No, we do not listen. We absolutely do not listen. Barbara Tuchman's The March of Folly is about why governments forever have done things manifestly against their own self-interests. She writes, rational thought. She writes about the Trojan horse episode from Greek and Trojan history. Rational thought clearly counseled the Trojans to suspect a trick when they woke to find the entire Greek army had vanished, leaving only a strange and monstrous prodigy beneath their walls. Yeah, well, when you put it that way, they were pretty stupid, weren't they? Rational procedure would have been, at the least, to test the horse for concealed enemies, as they were urgently advised to do by Capys the Elder, Laocoon, and Cassandra. That alternative was present and available, yet discarded in favor of self-destruction. In looking at the natural history of the planet, these nice birds stand out. Actually, they stand out, but they're not very different than the story of hundreds and thousands of species that used to live on the planet until very recently and don't. This is the greater koa finch from Hawaii, and the natural historians who found and studied them in Hawaii were aware of their declining numbers. They eagerly and enthusiastically found the last one in Hawaii in 1896 and shot it so they could study it. They shot the last one proudly. And that's not an isolated story by any stretch of the imagination. Bill Bryson wrote a beautiful book, A Short History of Nearly Everything, and I'll read, just to end the presentation, a little bit from it about this tendency. If this book has a lesson, it is that we are awfully lucky to be here. And by we, I mean every living thing. To achieve any kind of life in this universe of ours appears to be an achievement. As humans, we are doubly lucky, of course. We enjoy not only the privilege of existence, but also the singular ability to appreciate it, and even, in a multitude of ways, to make it better. It is a talent we've only begun to grasp. We are really at the beginning of it all. The trick, of course, is to make sure we never find the end. And that, almost certainly, will require a good deal more than lucky breaks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that amazing talk. Absolutely fantastic. We've got about 5 minutes to take some questions. We'll use a roaming mic here. So if anyone has any questions for Michael in relation to...
I'm the roaming mic.
You're the roaming mic? Okay. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand and we'll get the mic over to you to get you amplified. Well, I have a question to...
I got tons of questions.
I've got a few, yeah. If cultural heritage art institutions, if the solution isn't this kind of standard meeting format where, discussing digital strategy, how do they, from your experience, how do they engage with the Wikimedia community, with the social media? How do they make the most of that? What's been your approach at the Smithsonian Institution, at least?
Our approach at the Smithsonian, since we're so big, with 28 separate museums and research centers plus a zoo, is to try everything. I've seen over the last 3 years a real change. I've started to see the success. 3 years ago, we knew this was happening, like the John Cleese character in the Killer Rabbit. We sort of predicted this was going to happen. If you read technology stuff, you knew in 2001, 2, 3, 4, Lawrence Lessig's The Future of Ideas and Free Culture, Howard Rheingold's book about mobile. The pattern was established then pretty clearly. Wikinomics is another 2006, Tapscott and Williams. It's the manual for this relationship, for releasing the hubris, the institutional hubris that connects us to this clearly. This business model of broadcast didn't even work that well when it worked. Clay Shirky says we used it because that's what the tools we had available to us let us do. In walking around the block once with that question, I've seen so many different ways that it works, that the breakthrough happens. Sometimes it's an enlightened leader at the top with a reluctant staff and board of directors. Sometimes it's bottom up. Sometimes it's outside in. Sometimes it's not at all. And it's very difficult for me to predict the thing that's going to work and make the breakthrough, other than, I think, building and maintaining a sense of urgency, keeping the ideas present and well-nourished so that when leaders are ready for them, they're there like tools. They're already sharp. Abraham Lincoln, a very fascinating American president, said something like, if he had 6 hours to cut down a tree, he'd spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. So I think the message I want to have resonate in this talk and in all the work that I've been doing is to keep the ideas, everyone. No one's going to write this manual for us. It's up to you to do it, and it can't wait. And do everything you can to work together and keep the ideas in play. The breakthroughs come. They absolutely come because I've seen them happen in your organizations.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that, Michael.
Sure.
So here we go. Question over there.
Hi, my name is Kari Nihti. I work for the Finnish broadcasting company as a TV producer. That's the broadcast stuff you mentioned earlier, yeah? And you're sort of representing the broadcasting stuff in a historical way and presenting the culture for people. I visited Smithsonian. It's great. And the stuff you are sort of providing now is saying that we have this huge challenge. And I quite agree with you with that one. And that was perfectly provided for us. And now I'd like to ask you, you know how the situation is. Could you give us some examples on what have you done in Smithsonian in order to take use of this new way the physics works?
Sure. You took a left turn there at the end of your question. I was expecting you to go right. I had the answer already queued up for the question I thought you were going to ask. No, that's okay. I'll give a strategy answer, and then as I'm doing that, I'll try and think of the good pragmatic answer. The strategic answer is that in 2009, we got together and tried to create a shared language around what it was going to be like living and working and making decisions and prioritizing in this epoch. And we very explicitly, and I think gently and beautifully articulated some of these ideas so that, well, with each other, not from smart people to the staff, but together articulated these ideas so that we knew what it would feel like to begin doing less broadcasting and more of this other thing. We talk about a new learning model that acknowledges that interactivity and dialogue have always been a part of knowledge creation, and that now these new wonderful tools give us a new way of doing that. It goes on and on. It's very accessible. I can read it aloud during a long shower, 20 minutes long. And I encourage you to go look that up, Smithsonian Web and New Media Strategy. It gives us permission to behave a certain way. And I'll say the things that have happened since then that I'm most proud of are the very humble and modest steps we've taken towards an open intellectual property policy, an open platform. Rather than think that our job was to manufacture and dispense knowledge as a finished product, we're beginning to allow what we know and do and have to be a platform that helps other people be successful. So the degree to which we've been releasing public domain CC0 content, the Cooper Hewitt Museum, National Design Museum in New York City just released their collection data in CC0. I think they're working with Europeana to begin building the next thing that happens. So, yeah, one small example. And there are many other good examples in this room.
Okay, I think we have a question over here.
Thanks. There's a tweet. I don't know if the person is present here, but asking, what do you think Michael Edson's theory of change is? How do you think he understands the relationships of power in the world? I think you should be able to try and reply to that. Big questions. Your theory of change, how do you understand the relationships of power in the world?
Wow.
Take it away.
I do, there's I've done some work with aging joints with a physical therapist, and there's this idea in physical therapy that you get what you practice. And there's also the idea of Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. You put in your 10,000 hours on any subject, and at the end of that, you actually really know something. And I've begun I've put in maybe 8,000 hours trying to understand how our big, intentionally change-resistant institutions can change, how they do change. We're built not to change quickly, not to be capricious. And I don't know, there's not a unified theory to pull from physics. There's not a unified theory of change. It's very nuanced. It's very hard hand-carved puzzle pieces within each organization. But I do know, and I guess I'm retreading Sam's question a little bit, I do know that it happens through urgency. I do know that it happens when institutions are focused on the outcomes. And actually, one quick story. It's one I tell very often when I'm lucky enough, privileged enough to speak. I had some experience with the National World War II Memorial Museum in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I was just immediately impressed with their sense of urgency and their lack of worry about making some of these tactical decisions. Do we invest in broadcast, or do we invest also in new models? And their director said, basically, every day, every week, there's a World War II survivor in our lobby in tears, distraught, because their children and their grandchildren don't know anything about World War II. 60 million people died, 58 million people died in that war in the not too distant past, and they don't know. No one knows. And these veterans say, you, National World War II Memorial Museum, have to help them remember. That institution is very focused on outcomes. They don't exist just to exist. They exist to tell stories about that war so that that memory persists. I may have elements of this story wrong, but my perception is that they had once planned on building a physical archives and study center there to be a center for scholarship about World War II history in the US. And after understanding their new digital strategy, they abandoned those plans. I think they even sold the land because they knew they wouldn't have the kind of impact in the world, the kind of outcomes they wanted that mattered at a big enough scale if 100 scholars a year could come and visit them in New Orleans. They're putting the effort into the model of knowledge creation that you all are here to celebrate and learn about this week. I guess the answer to that question is that if we're focused honestly on outcomes, the change models become very easy.
Okay. Great, well thanks very much, and can you all join me in giving Michael Edson another hand for a brilliant talk?
Thank you. I'm going to pull the plug out.
So I'm sure everyone's appreciated just what a busy festival we've had this last few days. Unfortunately, some people have been working really hard on the open cultural data front, have not been able to make it in person, and one such individual who isn't present but has been enormously supportive of the work being done, particularly in Europe, to make more openly licensed cultural data available is Vice President of the European Commission, Neelie Kroes, and we now have a short video announcement from the Commissioner.
Data is a 21st century commodity. It is the new oil. There is almost no limit to the economic and social wonders it can generate. New applications and new tools appear every day, and that's why the Commission has an ambitious open data strategy to really make the most of this huge asset within our single market. Here are 4 things we are doing in particular. Number 1, we have proposed new legislation to open up public sector information, so businesses and citizens can more easily access and use this great resource across the EU without complicated or costly conditions. For the first time, the scope also includes cultural institutions, and the Commission will be practicing what it preaches by putting our own data on a single online portal with free and easy access. All this takes a big cultural change, but I'm confident that the countries of the EU can look ahead to the huge opportunity and support our proposal. After all, opening up public sector data could generate economic gains around 40 billion a year, and that's not something anyone can ignore right now. The second place, you may be aware of exciting recent developments for cultural open data. Over recent years, the EU has promoted Europeana as the access point for Europe's libraries, museums, galleries and archives. It is a treasury trove of cultural heritage and a creative hub. So I'm delighted that just last week, Europeana announced it was putting the metadata for over 20 million exhibits into the public domain, using the Creative Commons CC0 open license. This is a step change in open data access and an international first, moving away from a closed and controlled approach to this kind of data to one based on large-scale, free reuse, where you can link it up, for example, with tourism or broadcasting data and find ever more creative uses. In the open and fertile environment that Europeana has now created, I hope we will see many more apps blooming. Just imagine the new applications for libraries, schools or hotels, all powered by Europeana. So a big thank you to those cultural institutions that had the vision to take us there. On the third place, openness also benefits science, helping scientists collaborate and progress, and helping citizens, businesses and research funders benefit. We have proposed to make available under open access all publications that stem from EU-funded research, and to progressively open access to the data from scientific experiments and studies too. This is a great way to enable a new reality for science, and I'm glad the EU is playing its part. On In fourth place, we will of course continue to support research related to open data, like the LOD2 project, using open source software to help people publish linked data. Likewise, over the next 2 years, we will invest 45 million euros on open access infrastructures for science and on digital preservation. I hope that projects like this will continue under Horizon 2020, the next generation of EU research and innovation funding. I know you at the OKFestival don't need convincing about the benefits of openness, nor about the huge innovation that it can fuel. Rest assured, the EU is behind you. Have a great festival.